Hey there, everyone. It's Aaron with the Mind Half Full. I hope you had a good and safe 4th of July weekend. This week's episode is going to be about double standards in a relationship. So, what are double standards in a relationship, and how do they often go unnoticed? Double standards in a relationship are when one partner is held to a different set of expectations or rules than the other person is, and they often go unnoticed because they can be subtle, they can be normalized by society, or masked as that's just how things are and you need to accept it and go along with it. Sometimes one person benefits from the double standard and doesn't see a reason to question it. They don't see it as a double standard. That's just their normal. Some examples of double standards in relationships are when one partner expects loyalty and flirts with others and then excuses it. So they tell you that, you're not allowed to look at someone else, you're not allowed to, flirt with anyone else, but then they turn around and do it, and then they just dismiss it as they're a friend of mine and that's just how we are, or that's just my personality. That is a double standard, and that is, in my opinion, a unhealthy double standard, and it's not one that should be tolerated. Another one is when one person is allowed to vent or be emotional or talk about their feelings, but then when the other person tries to do the same, the card's basically flipped on them, and you're the problem. Your feelings aren't valid. You're being called dramatic or weak for sharing your thoughts, or basically your feelings aren't as important as my feelings. What you're doing here is worse than what I'm doing to you. That's a double standard, and that's also a toxic trait. That is a narcissistic trait. Another one, this one is kind of a weird one. Gender roles, in a sense. Kind of like how men are expected to pay for everything and provide, while women are expected to nurture and forgive even when they're hurt. If you expect someone to do something, you should expect to reciprocate that same action or that same emotion. If you expect a woman to nurture you and forgive you when you mess up, then you need to extend that same courtesy to her when she messes up. You don't keep bringing it up and using it to hurt her. You need to be forgiving and nurture her the same way you expect her to. And that goes for men and women. It's both sides, because everybody does it. It's not just one party more so than the other. And then another one, I kind of covered this last week with the boundaries video. When one person gets space when they need it and the other person gets guilt tripped for needing alone time, which I did talk about how I had dealt with that, where I was expected to respect when they wanted their personal time, but then when I wanted my personal time, I was guilted into needing that alone time because I was not giving them the attention that they wanted at the time. So that is a double standard, and it's not a healthy double standard. Why is it okay for one partner to express emotions, but then the other one is told to calm down? That's being dismissive of your partner's feelings. You're allowed to talk about your feelings and say everything that you want and think, but I'm not allowed to do the same. That's a unhealthy double standard. That's controlling. That's narcissistic. So this usually reflects a imbalance in emotional tolerance or maturity. The partner doing the dismissing may not be emotionally mature or equipped to handle the intensity of the situation. They minimalize or invalidate the other person's feelings, basically saying, well, you did this, it made me feel like this, and I don't care how you feel, or you say how you feel, and then it's flipped and used to basically come back on you to where you're still the bad guy in the end. Over time, this teaches the partner that's constantly being dismissed to basically be silent. They then become the silenced partner, who their emotions are the problem. They're not allowed to express their emotions. Only the other partner is allowed to express their emotions. That's not okay. That's not healthy. That's toxic. Don't tolerate it. I tolerated that a lot in numerous relationships. It is not healthy, and unfortunately it's taken me quite a while to realize that, and I'm not going to allow that anymore. So if you are dealing with this, then you need to put a stop to it and take a stand. And if your partner can't respect that, then you need to reconsider your partner, because honestly, at that point, what are you even doing? Because nothing that you ever say or feel is really going to be taken seriously if you're continuously being silenced, invalidated, and minimalized. So how does it affect someone mentally when their needs are dismissed? When someone comes to you and says, hey, you did this and it made me feel this way, and then that person just completely blows it off as, well, oh well, I don't care. Or then they flip the script and, well, you did this and it made me feel like this, and that's way worse than what I did to you. That's gaslighting in a sense. That's narcissism and controlling. This can lead, and this is kind of more of the mental aspect of it, it can lead to feelings of isolation. Isn't there for me, I'm just a convenience to them. It will lower their self-worth. Am I really valuable to my partner in any way? Or am I around? And then confusion, because then it makes you wonder, is anything that I want or need or care about important to my partner at all? Or do they just not care and they want what they want when they want it, how they want it, and don't care how they get it as long as they get it? That partner may begin to question where their needs are valid or if they're just too much. And that's where a lot of self-doubt comes from, and then insecurities come out. This can turn into anxiety, depression, or people-pleasing behavior just to maintain the peace and keep the relationship, because they're attached to you. They have feelings for you, so they will. I've said this before, and I'll say it again, and before I say it, I'm going to preface this with, it can go both ways, but generally, what I have seen in my experiences, men will sacrifice their happiness for their relationship. Women will sacrifice their relationship for their happiness. I have been put through that. I have seen numerous friends and family be put through that same thing. Again, it goes both ways, but the way I worded that is just based off of what I have seen with my personal experiences. Don't hate me too much. So, those are the things that can really affect, it kind of turns into mental health issues. They're constantly worrying, are they enough for you? Do you like them? Are they worth your time? Are they too much for you? And then, they're worrying about everything. They get depressed, which, I've dealt with that. Felt like I was failing my partner, my job, my family, all aspects of my life. And that it was like a trifecta that snowballed. One just kind of bled into the other and just kept going until it just kept, going full circle. Make sure you are not being dismissive of your partner's feelings and needs, because it can really severely affect their mental health, and then it can really affect your relationship. I talked a little bit earlier about how gender roles can feed into double standards. I'm going to touch on that for a second. Traditional roles often assign emotional suppression to men and emotional expression to women. So when a man opens up, he might feel weak because, we're taught that you're a man. Pull up your pants and deal with it and trudge on. And then, they may feel weak if they're not doing that. When a woman asserts herself, she's called aggressive. These expectations can harm both genders. Men get emotionally stunted and women get labeled unfairly for speaking up. But I will say that there are instances where that can be flip-flopped. This isn't a written in stone, black and white, clear-cut thing, because there are exceptions to every rule. How do these expectations hurt both men and women? Men are often denied the right to be vulnerable or scared. It is very hard to get a man to open up and be vulnerable, because he's taught that being vulnerable is essentially being weak. Talked about a video that I had watched, probably my first or second video, of a man that was, talking to his partner. He was having a real deep thought about a spool of wire that he had for like 20 years. And, he basically got down to the last little bit, and he was just sitting there reminiscing on basically everything that he'd had that wire through, and he was opening up and being vulnerable to his partner. And you can see like he's really opening up and being vulnerable, and then his partner just shuts him down. And you can see the moment where that just hurt him, and he realized that what I have to say does not matter, because she was more worried about something else that was not, essentially that big of a deal. That can lead to bottled up stress and anger, which I have dealt with. I know a lot of friends that have dealt with it. Men will bottle things up because we don't want to burden others with what we feel is not their problem. I talked about male suicide rates being so high in my first video, and a lot of that stems from, men are afraid to be vulnerable and talk and open up, and then they bottle everything up, and then eventually it comes to a head, and then it's too late to take care of it. Women, on the other hand, are expected to overextend emotionally, forgive too easily, and stay in unhealthy situations for the sake of the relationship. Now, I want to talk about that a little bit. People do expect women to, endure and just keep pressing on and just keep forgiving because that's what women do. And then they stay in unhealthy situations that ends up tending to be a domestic abuse issue. And then women stay in unhealthy situations for the sake of the relationship or the sake of their children. Men and women will both do this. I am guilty of it and staying in a unhealthy relationship because, I was hoping for better and that ended up not being the thing. And then the other person chose their happiness instead of working on things. There's got to be effort on both sides to improve and fix things. It can't just be a double standard of, well, you need to fix this, and then they put in no work to fix it, because it takes two. It's not just one person, it's both people. It may be more one person's fault than the other, but both people do need to put in work, but not just one person. That solves nothing. That just basically molds that one person into what the other person wants and allows them to stay the same way that they are without making any major changes to themselves. I'm gonna kind of move on from this. Are all double standards bad? Not necessarily. Some double standards are actually agreed roles based on strengths or life circumstances. For example, one partner may handle finances while the other manages household duties. So how to tell that double standards are going, from healthy to unhealthy, because like I just talked about, some double standards are agreed on based on strengths and circumstances, and then it works because it's done as a team. But when it starts becoming one-sided rules are set without thought of the other person or a sense of fairness, that's when it is moving into a bad double standard. And then that can lead to resentment or a feeling of inequality, and then it will just kind of snowball from there. Now, to kind of wrapping this up, something for you to think about. You can throw your comments in the comment section, or you can just kind of think about it, and then, when you're at work, have you ever noticed yourself applying a double standard? That's my question, but I'm going to throw in a little bit of, kind of my thoughts on that. Yes, most people have, whether they realize it or not, have applied a double standard. An example is expecting a partner to always make time for you, but you don't reciprocate making time for that partner. You don't prioritize their needs in the same way that they prioritize your needs. Those are double standards, whether you think it is or not. It's double standards. And then, it may start small, but then it's going to turn into something bigger, which turns into something that's just unhealthy, and it's not going to do either of you any good. So I'm going to give a couple of examples. I'm going to give a good example and a bad example of a healthy double standard that I have had in a relationship, and then I'm going to give a bad example. So a good example was an ex and I maintained a house, and it was agreed on, for the financial situation because of the pay differences. I would pay the full amount of rent, I would pay the Wi-Fi, the security company, and then there was one other bill I can't remember off the top of my head. She would pay water and the electric. That way we were both contributing, but also she would do the weekly grocery shopping, and it was budgeted down for two people. And it basically, when you put those two amounts side by side, it made the amounts, fairly even within probably $30-40 one way or the other. It was fairly even. And that worked for us. That's an example of a double standard that worked. The bad example was always wanting to tell me how I had done wrong, but not being willing to listen to how she was doing wrong and not caring how she was doing wrong. But I was expected to listen to everything that she said, and I would be told, do better, you need to do better. When I said the same thing, it basically fell by the wayside, and then I basically became the silenced partner, because every time I would say something like that, it would get flipped back on me and I would become the bad guy, because it would, get shifted into something else, and it just kept coming back to me being the bad guy, me being worse in my concerns about how she was acting. So that's my bad example. What are ways that couples can fix double standards? And I'm going to give you a few things. They may work for you, they may not, but it's a starting point. So talk openly about your expectations. Don't be afraid to share your expectation with your partner and discuss it. Remember, compromise is not when one person gets what they want and the other person just kind of, okay, well, they won this one. A compromise should be you both are equally happy and unhappy at the same time. No person should win more over than the other. It should be equal. That is the point of a compromise. So, talk about the expectations. You can compromise on them, but don't be afraid to share your expectations. Don't let that be silenced. And this is for men and women. Do not let your expectations be silenced and then you get put into a bad double standard situation. Another thing is to call things out with curiosity, not accusation. If it's something that you don't understand or something that's bothering you, ask and talk to your partner. Try to get to the bottom of it. Don't just, accuse them, you're doing this and I don't like it. It's, hey, you're doing this and I'm kind of, curious about why you're doing this, or why you feel this is okay. Don't be accusatory about it, because that other person is going to get defensive and then it's going to go, in a not positive way. And then, this is more of like an individual thing. Ask yourself, would I be okay with my partner doing what I'm doing, or would I not be okay? If you wouldn't be okay with your partner doing that to you, don't do it to your partner. You don't want them doing it to you, I guarantee you that they don't want you to be doing it to them. So just kind of keep that question in the back of your mind. It's kind of really easy to, disregard and forget people's feelings, but it's not going to lead anywhere good. So if you're serious about the relationship and you do care about that person, keep that in mind and try to do better with it. We learn something new every day. We grow in a new way every day, emotionally, mentally, in our maturity. We grow every day from our experiences. So just kind of keep that in mind. Would my partner be okay with me doing this to them? And if the answer is no, you should probably not do it. Seek counseling if it's too hard to break these patterns. If you have continuously, just kept going in the same pattern of talking, expressing your concerns, and then the behaviors just keep going and you can't seem to break that cycle, it's okay and it's healthy to seek a relationship counselor, because sometimes you just need a third party that's unbiased to sit there and listen and look at you and tell you that you're both wrong. You need to fix it, and this is how you fix it. And whether you take that advice or not, that is 100% up to you. Again, if you're serious about the relationship, you're going to do this. And I'm going to say this, another double standard, because I have dealt with it. If one partner says, I think we need to go to couples counseling, sit down and make the call together. Do not use it as a test to see how much your partner cares about the relationship and if they're going to go do it and set it up on their own, because that's not fair. That I feel like that's setting them up for failure. Again, that's something I went through. I feel like we need to go to counseling. Okay. And then that broad statement is put out there. Is it today, tomorrow, next week, next month? So sit down and make the call together. It shows solidarity between the two of you and that you both equally care. Don't just put it on one person or the other as a test, or just you said it but you don't want to do it. So the last tip I'm going to give you, and then I'm going to round this video out, is practice fairness, not control. Things should be fair between partners. You are a team. working towards the same goal. You are not two individuals where one controls the other and gets what they want. That is a double standard. That is unhealthy. That is toxic. It needs to be fair, not controlling. Control is not a healthy element in a relationship. One person should not be getting everything that they want. The other person shouldn't be minimalized and dismissed and made to feel like they are not valued in the relationship. If you are putting someone in that position, I can tell you it does not feel good to that person. It more than likely makes them feel like someone is clawing up and down their chest and in their gut 24/7 because they are stressed out. They are worried about the relationship. They are worried about how much they care about you, and it seems like you don't care about them. So don't do that to your partner. The goal is to spend your life with that person, not just spend a little bit of time with them and pass the time. Something that, I had heard when I was going through my breakup, and, it kind of really made sense to me, is some people are meant to be in your life for a season or two, but not the whole harvest. Your goal is to find the person that's going to be with you for the whole harvest. So put forth the effort to make sure that that person is going to stay around for the whole harvest. Not just a season or two because you couldn't get over yourself or your mental issues or your immaturity. Just some things to think about. Again, these are all my opinions, from personal experience and dealing with friends and whatnot. So I'm going to go ahead and round this out. Next week, I am going to focus a little bit more on the mental aspect for men. I will give you a little bit of the next video, but it's actually going to be a two-part. Next week's video is going to be kind of a half and half. It's going to start out talking more in depth about the men's mental health and relationship. Also, we're going to switch over to some female mental aspects in a relationship. But then also I'm going to start talking about toxicity in a relationship. And then the week after will be the rest of the toxicity video because I have a lot of things to go with that. I'm going to go ahead and say, goodbye for this week. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope to see you for the next video. Stay safe and, remember, be kind, and what you do next matters. Take care.